Hola and boa noite. I think I said that right. It seemed appropriate to greet you all in Portuguese tonight as CST continues the World Cup coverage tonight. Two of the 8 quarterfinal teams speak Portuguese, and only one speaks English. Spoiler alert, it's not us. The U.S. men's national team got bounced on Saturday in a knockout round by the Netherlands, 3-1, ending the dream. Oh, well. But we can use this opportunity to genuflect and see just how much growth these baby Yanks need to undergo in the next 4 years. With me, as always, we have our 3 panelists. They joined us at Grainworks on Saturday to watch the game. Unfortunately, like I said, we didn't come out on top, but there's a lot to grow on. So let me welcome them one at a time. Let's bring in, first of all, he was the first one to show us here. Adnan, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing pretty good. Doing pretty good. Good to see you at Grainworks. Great for Grainworks to host us. An hour before the game. Not so great to watch the game, but I'm glad to see you there as well.
Yeah, result aside, it was a lot of fun. Really glad to be there.
Yeah, it would have been nicer if we were there for the next one, which will be starting up on Friday. But beggars can't be choosers. Let's move down to right underneath me, DJ Schweitzer. How you doing tonight, DJ?
I'm wonderful. Good to see you as always, Jeff.
Yeah, good to see you there. I did pick up another one of the added extra time stuff. You guys had it on sale there. Great to see business is booming, but also great to see you there.
Always great to get out and have some beers while watching soccer.
Yeah, it was nice. It was very nice. And our last board member here, Justin. How you doing tonight, Justin Blair?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm recovering pretty well from not having any soccer today, so doing pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, did anybody have withdrawal from sort of waking up in the morning and not seeing a 10 o'clock game?
Yeah, I was hitting refresh.
I just went, to go look up the scores, and there's no games today.
I think it was mostly my boss just being happy I wasn't distracted for about 2-hour windows each day today.
Well, I mean, I think I opened up FOTMob and it was like an FA Cup game. I'm like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. I didn't. I think we all needed a break from soccer, which is why we weren't here on Monday. I was also under the weather. It was, I believe, just a cold, but I was not feeling too good. Thanks for everybody that's joining us tonight, though. And most of all, thanks to Grainworks for hosting us. It was a really good atmosphere there. I counted maybe 200, 250 there. That might be large, but I thought there was about 3 figures there.
I think it was super accurate, especially with that back room opened up compared to the first show. They kind of opened up some extra space, and it was awesome to see so many people out for it.
Yeah, and packed. No clue how many people, but definitely packed.
I mean, I could tell that, considering that I had ordered my Mama Bear Max breakfast sandwich, and it came at halftime. I knew it was a lot of people there. But, once again, thank you for Grainworks, Mama Bear Max, AOC for hosting everything there. And of course, we also want to thank our sponsors as well. Thank you very much to Shared Cheese Bar for helping us with sponsorship here. And of course, thank you very much to Apollo Home for helping us out. Go online at apollohome.com if you have any needs for heating, plumbing, cooling, electric. They'll be able to help you out by sending a technician there for free, as long as you mention that you're a CST listener. So once again, go to apollohome.com. They'll waive the $79 service fee, and they'll help you out as well as they can. But yeah, it's been a few days. And so I'm hoping that people can sort of remember the U.S. Netherlands game. I know sometimes for me, it's hard to be at a live show and remember half the things that happened on the television. But just to summarize real quick for those who weren't listening or watching, 3-1 loss, quickly got 2-0 in the first half, sort of 2 goals that looked very similar to each other. Memphis Depay, and also I think, I don't know his first name, but Blind. And then
Blind.
Blind. Okay. You learn something new every day. The second half started up. Berhalter made a few changes. Got an excuse me goal to make it very exciting, and for some people, very hoarse. Only for the curtain to close on our participation. Denzel Dumfries with the third goal in the second half, and that closes the book. All four of us have watched it, so let me get your opinions on what the best and worst was coming out of this game. Let's go down to DJ first.
Yeah, so starting off with the best, just to get things good in there first. I really love the devotion to offensive playing style that this team showed, not just in this match, but throughout the tournament. And I think that was a real testament to what Berhalter has been building over the last 4 years as they've searched to get not only back into this World Cup, but also kind of develop a style. And that was something that, for whatever reason, was extremely important to the people who were selecting coaches the last few rounds that we've had. And we abandoned that for a little bit just to try to get us back on track. And Berhalter established that style and then executed it in a way that pretty much every match the U.S. had at this tournament, they were the dominant dictating offensive team throughout each of those matches against England, against Wales, against Iran, and against Netherlands. They were able to do that. And, that's a great sign of the way that we've been able to develop and the style of coaching that we've had. On the flip side of it, the worst is easily, it's kind of on the same end of that spectrum. It was the finishing in that match. We could definitely take issue, and I know we'll talk more about the goals themselves that we conceded, but we were, we had the first clear-cut chance in the match with Pulisic's break-in on goal. We outshot the Dutch 17-11. We had an XG advantage of 2.1 to 1.8 in expected goals. In big tournaments, you have to take those chances, and who knows how this match would have played out if we'd actually done that earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a game where we had our opportunities pretty early on, but it was just those small little executions that couldn't be, couldn't turn into points for us early on. I think if we had gotten an early goal, maybe things would have changed for the better. We might have been more prepared for the offense that was looking at us, but you do what you can. Adnan, let's go over to you. What were your best and worst from this loss against the Netherlands?
It's going to be, I think for me, the worst would be just like the individual mistakes. The Netherlands had a great tactical plan, and we can talk a little bit about it in a bit, but I think what really defined the game actually was a couple of really bad errors where just Tyler Adams first, but then afterwards, Serginho Dest and Anthony Robinson just got caught ball watching. And all of those players have been really good up to that point, and you had those moments, and so it is. For the best, this is going to sound weird given that the U.S. shipped 3 goals, but the play of the center backs and goalkeeper, Matt Turner came out with some really, really strong saves, and you go and you look at the center backs, Tim Ream and Walker Zimmerman. Their passing maybe wasn't exactly perfect, but every time that the Dutch actually came at them specifically, they were up for the moment. Especially Tim Ream, there were 1 or 2 moments where you believed like, oh no, it's 1-1. I think maybe with Gakpo or one of the other pacey Dutch players, and Tim Ream's just able to keep up and slow things down. And testament. If the U.S. had made it through, I kind of wondered maybe that would have been enough for Ream to make it onto the team of the tournament. But so it is.
Yeah, it's pretty tough when to really blame it on anybody in the middle there. I think Ream and Zimmerman were trying to focus on the play in front of them, and you could see on both of the goals they gave up in the first half that there was just nobody back there. It was zones of space there. And if I can go into mine, maybe my worst is that we just did not have the attention on the sides. I am probably to blame a little bit with this, where I said I thought Dumfries was weak on his side. But to be honest, 2 of the assists came from him. The last goal came from him. He played probably one of the best games, but I fault our side for not picking up on him when they needed to. As far as the best is concerned, it's hard to really give a best, considering that we really had to fight back in this game. But Um, I would just have to say, I think the wings played pretty well. I think Pulisic, considering how we weren't sure how 100% he would be in this game, he played a pretty decent game. He had some good looks at the goal. His assist was really what set up the first goal, even though it was an accident. And Timmy Way played a pretty decent game too. I really think you have your wingers in place for the next cycle. I don't see us losing Weah, Pulisic, or to some extent Aronson or Gio Reyna. I think we've got those locked into place. So it felt good to see that type of performance coming out of them. If any of you guys are listening and you have your opinions on the best and worst from this game between the U.S. and Netherlands, let us know in the chats. We'll read them out. But let's shift it over to Justin. Justin, can you give us what your best and worst was from this particular game?
Yeah, conceded at the death. I was going to say the wingers as well as my best. As kind of a general over the whole tournament, I was really impressed with Weah, Pulisic. They played very well. Aronson and Gio Reyna, obviously, given a tough task coming in off the bench, not really ever getting in rhythm, never really connecting in on some of the balls. They're much better players at finding a 9. I know Holland, Erling Holland, and Gio Reyna, their time at Dortmund. Gio was electric at getting the ball in spaces and creating one-on-one matchups for Holland. So if we get a 9, those wingers are even going to be deadlier. My worst is probably just to close out on the World Cup with the midfield play that we had. A lot of minutes for each of those guys, so can't really fault them in some of those spaces, but just didn't close out on them. We didn't make very many adjustments on what the Netherlands were doing. So it is a bit disappointing because you would have liked to see this World Cup go by with a really solid firm feeling about our midfield. And I think most of us are going to walk away with that, but to kind of get exposed there at the end is kind of brutal.
Yeah, it was tough to really be exposed by the Netherlands play, but to be honest, they've played a pretty solid tournament so far. I mean, they granted, I think a lot of people looked at Group A and thought they were a weak team, or had the potential to sort of wilt under the pressure. I shouldn't call them weak because they beat the pants off us. But this was a team that was prepared for us. If we look at this game in general, Louis van Gaal, the head coach for Netherlands, basically summed it up, said the U.S. national team didn't adapt. They didn't adjust, and we made our tactical plan based on targeting the flanks. So he came in with his game plan in place. I guess the general question I want to ask is, how flexible is Berhalter's game? I mean, what could he have done to change this outcome?
I mean, I think the first place to start is like Berhalter's a system guy. Like I think we've known that about him pretty much from the early days of his tenure. And if you followed him earlier back into his crew days, I mean, he very clearly had a way that he wanted to play, and he not only recruited players who he thought could come in and do that job, but he recruited players who could come in and do that, operate in his system and execute it. And good players were often left out or haven't even yet been brought in the case of someone like Brandon Vasquez, because they don't necessarily have the time or the ability to fit into that system. So he's just, as at his very core, he is a system manager. So you're really not going to see him deviate too much from that, right? Like he brought in all these guys to fit into this specific puzzle. So that's kind of what he's going to do. And for a lot of teams, that's enough, right? Like you either have a limitation in the players that are available to you, or you have so many good players that you can just execute and do whatever you need to do. We're like leaning towards the second half of that camp, but we're not there yet. And I feel like what we're really seeing is the beginning stages of being able to do what we want to do, execute every time. And I'll go back to my earlier point. We did that. Like our offense was squared and ready to go, and it produced all tournament long until the final third. And that last final ball or finish is where things really kind of fell apart. And so Could he have adjusted? Sure, but he was never going to, because that's not really part of his game plan.
I think there's a little bit more to that Van Gaal quote where he wasn't talking about saying, oh, yeah, well, the U.S. didn't adjust and we did. He was saying that the way that the U.S. approaches all their games, they take themselves and they want to play their games, and they're not going to let other teams dictate how they play. And that was something that shared with, I don't remember exactly which countries he compared us to, but maybe Brazil or France. Whereas he looked at the Netherlands and said, well, we think that we can get a little bit of an advantage by adapting to the other teams. So I think that's just actually a credit to what Berhalter did. It's usually the Netherlands that plays the possession pretty soccer against the other teams. They're usually the ones controlling the game. And, the result didn't go the US's way, but they controlled the play. We played like the Dutch. And I mean that like very, very, very intentionally. Greg Berhalter has experience playing in Holland. You go and you look at Ernie Stuur, the sporting director. He's part Dutch. This is very much how the direction the USSF has wanted to go into, playing in this style, and it showed on the field. And quite frankly, I think more so the problem was that when the US is up playing on their A game, they can go toe to toe with the Netherlands. But the problem was that we went for our A game for 3 games in a row, and by the time we hit the 4th, level dropped a little bit. And you just couldn't maintain it. We just didn't have the depth to maintain it. But I think I want to say credit to Berhalter. It's U.S. fans have been asking for this for a long time, and we got it, and it's nice.
Yeah, Justin, what was your opinion about the play of the game, and perhaps Berhalter's approach to it?
This is kind of the copy and paste from the previous 3 matches. I mean, I think we try to do a lot with our wing backs, and that left us exposed in a lot of positions. But to their credit, they got back. I mean, I can't believe. I think Anthony Robinson played every minute in this World Cup. I mean, credit to that. I mean, that's a brutal. They're playing 4 games in what is essentially 2 weeks' time, less than 2 weeks' time. That's incredible that they play that way. But he's not going to make that adjustment, and frankly, we don't have enough unique tools to really kind of change the way we're approaching a game. All of our wingbacks basically play the same way. I think Weah may be a little bit more dynamic. Somebody else probably butchered that, but for me, Aronson and Pulisic, and Pulisic with a little bit more of the danger, but Aronson and Reina are just kind of the same, kind of like get into space, kind of create things, and there's really no pieces that you can change. And in the midfield, you weren't going to change anything there. And center backs, I think they played very well. So it's like, what adjustments was he going to make? I guess what I'm trying to put in there. I mean, you'd like to have had a more threatening 9. And if you're not getting that kind of play, then maybe 2 up top. I don't know exactly what else they could have done in that scenario. So I'm not gonna burn Berhalter for that, but just hopefully we get better in the next cycle. Fill in some of those, create different kind of ways to play.
Hopefully we would get some talent. I think that we don't have to depend on certain players to play a full 90 minutes for 3 group games and a knockout round game. Yeah, I mean, you take a look at our starting lineup, and Turner played everything. Ream played every minute. Adams played every minute, and Robinson was very close. He got subbed out like with 3 minutes left of extra time against Netherlands. But regardless, you've got positions that have been locked in, but were never real options in terms of switching them out or finding somebody to change the dynamic in a certain spot. Now, for granted, I think for the likes of Adams, you don't mess with what's working. For the likes of Robinson, it might be just a fact of there's nothing else that you can put there unless you switch Dest over to the other side.
For me, I think a lot of it comes down to the fact that the U.S. played the scoreline so narrowly. Um, it was 1-0 versus Wales up until the last 10 minutes, 1-0 to Iran for almost the whole game. You go and you look, if that is 2-0 or so against Wales, especially in the first half, maybe in the 70th minute you actually do have the room for to bring on a Costa. Maybe Wales doesn't have that same fight, and that's kind of one of the things where you're playing everything, like you're controlling the game, but you're also playing the margins very narrow, and that was ended up being a problem, I think, with depth there.
Okay. I mean, looking at the way that these goals were produced, Netherlands basically they cut down the sides and they brought it back into the middle. And it seemed like all three goals were carbon copies of that. Um, I think we mentioned a little bit about who could be at fault for these. Can we maybe dissect this a little bit in more detail? What could have been done to prevent these carbon copy goals from being scored?
I mean, I think the easy place. Oh, I'm sorry, Justin, to jump in there, man. I think the easy place, you look at this, and all three goals were, as you said, starting in wide positions, were finished off on the cross. I think what's important to point out here is that none of them were the same person making the mistake, right? Like, I watched each of them back a couple times through after my second viewing and just kind of really was like, who can we pin this on? And I think ultimately who we can pin this on, and I think this is a little unfair too, but it's a little bit on Berhalter. And I'll explain why here. It's, we were touching on this in just a moment ago. I think it was Adnan basically getting at, these guys are tired. Like, this is the same essentially starting 11 that's played all three matches with the exception of a striker getting switched in and out. And ultimately, when we fell behind in the game, we were chasing. We were looking for goals, pushing ourselves into new positions, trying to find either an equalizer or a leg back into things. And ultimately what that does is it puts you into bad positions every time. And on the first goal, when it was, Depay who was scoring, we saw Musa get stretched out of position. He was just in the wrong spot. And then by the time he realized it, it was too late. On the second goal, Dest was caught napping as Blin crept inside. And on the third one, it was Jedi who was marking the wrong person in his zone as Dumfries just hung wide open on the backside. These are all just mental mistakes. And ultimately, when you see three different players making mental mistakes, you can ultimately go, this is definitely going to be a tiredness issue, especially when it were guys who were not making those type of mistakes earlier on in the tournament.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think part of it again is the wing backs vacating that space. So, I mean, that's what we had to do to get back into the game. We had to push people forward. I mean, you saw Tyler Adams played more of a factor playing through the middle, but just caught napping on the counter. They were able to get into space, create problems. Our guys are rushing back, and boom, right back in the middle of the box. Easy goal.
Adams did what, 24, 25 miles over the course of 4 games. That's yeah. Him and Musa kind of missing out on Depay kind of makes sense in that context.
Yeah, I think if I'm Jesse Marsh, I'm a little nervous about how what Adams's condition is going to be when he returns to the pitch later on this month. But you can definitely say that he brought them, I think, to where they needed to be in the knockout stage and just didn't have much energy left. I mean, you wish that you could have brought somebody in who was a difference maker. I mean, it seems like we're lacking that when we need the difference. We are lacking that type of dynamic in this game. It's an 11 versus the world type of setup, and the playmaker isn't quite there. Somebody had mentioned in the chat that it seemed like we're lacking a creative playmaker in the middle. Do we need one, or is it just a matter of, I don't know, it doesn't fit the system?
It's a little hard to say, like, because international soccer is so different than like the big leagues in Europe. But like you look at MLS, the number 10, that creative spot is just huge in the league. Here, at Cincinnati, Lucho Acosta, but you can go to Seattle, Nico Lodero, and so on and so forth. And the US MND just doesn't have that player. Frankly, we've never really had that player. That said, like I mentioned, you don't really see those number 10 so much anymore in Europe. And Greg Berhalter put out a very European style system. So you should still be able to create chances. Yeah, I agree really that the team is lacking a little bit of creativity. For me, I kind of have to wonder between figuring that out through committee and not really having a striker who can really cement that place. That's the one absolute major thing that the squad as a whole needs to work out between that and striker.
Yeah, and this is something I think we can transition into right now. But just really quickly, talking about Haji Wright's goal, is a bit of a fluke goal, but still something that I think brought a little bit more energy back into this game. There's not much else I think you can talk about there, but the choice for number 9 is going to be questioned repeatedly over and over again. So looking at this roster, we can say that he likely got the number 9 position. I don't want to say wrong, but I think he might have underestimated it. Does anybody have a similar or differing opinion with that?
I 100% agree with you. That was the story going into the tournament. I mean, we don't know because all these players are unproven at this kind of competitive tournament. I mean, Pifok, we haven't had. I mean, he's played in Champions League, sure, but is he really on a World Cup stage? Is he going to be able to come in and make much of a difference compared to Josh Sargent? Is Pepe going to have a better game? It's really a position of need right now for the U.S. MNT. I know Vasquez is a solid finisher, but he's had his ups and downs. It's not like this player has been performing for multiple years and obviously not playing with the U.S. men's national team. So it's just a position that we need to circle on the map at 9 and really get that right.
I maintain that Vasquez should have been on the roster, but honestly, I'm really skeptical that any of the other alternatives really would have made a difference. We can talk about it just because it's because we can't actually see the counterfactual, but it really feels difficult for me to go look at Pifok, for example, who's lost his form for Union Berlin, and given how he's played with the U.S., to turn around and say okay, yeah, he would definitely have been the guy banging them in for the U.S., especially given that there were so few chances for the strikers at all. It's just we need a little bit more growth. We need a little bit more time. That was a position that has been a revolving door for the last 2 years with injuries to Sargent, with Sargent losing form, and then between Ferreira and Pepe, same thing. So it's a little bit hard to say, I think.
I think that's also, if it's a position of need, I'm a little flummoxed why you don't bring in more people in that position. Just if you're dependent on 3 separate strikers to fill that number 9, but don't have confidence in many of them, why not bring in a 4th? Especially, I know hindsight's 2020, but with Sargent going down and being unavailable in this game, that's suddenly at that place of I guess average performance suddenly becomes one of need, vast need. Did Berhalter strike out in terms of just bringing 3 strikers in?
I mean, I think it'd have been hard to devote much more than 3 strikers, in roster space. Ultimately, you've got a lot of positions you're trying to watch out for, and I think going in, kind of as the guys have already said, we kind of knew that was going to be a short-change position. You could have brought in Vasquez and played a guy who was behind the curve on the setup. You could have brought in, Pifok, and maybe he would have been able to rediscover some of the form he had earlier in this year. Maybe he wouldn't have. I think ultimately we're soft at the 9, and this isn't a new concept. We can get in line with 20 other countries that also struggle at that particular position. Everyone in the world, Germany included, is going, who the hell do we start up top? It's just a question that everyone struggles with. And ultimately, it really boils down to the fact that it's like a 1 in a million type chance to get a striker who actually knows what they're doing up there. Right now, Poland are a very unbalanced side, but they have Robert Lewandowski, and that drags them all over the place because he's just next level talent. We could just certainly birth someone out and it could work out okay for us. He could also be born into a bad generation and just be in a bad spot in general. So I think ultimately we couldn't have brought in someone that would have really moved the needle for us. I think Berhalter came in knowing, hey, I need a guy to check these boxes for me in these scenarios. And he picked the guys he thought were best for it. I don't necessarily agree, but I don't think it would have gotten us much more than a round further.
Yeah. We've gotten an opinion on Facebook basically saying from David Moore, he doesn't disagree with the arguments for Vasquez. Not sure if it would have done much better. System seems to be built around attacking wings and a less attacking number 9. I mean, I guess that's the argument that you have there for Berhalter not bringing in additional strikers, that he had the form he wanted to play and he wasn't going to deviate from that.
Yeah, you definitely could pick out moments in that Wells game where you could have really had a guy like Brandon Vasquez. But I mean, there's moments like that for each individual player. I think David hit the nail on the head. I mean, we're just playing very aggressive wing forwards. So we need to play at our strengths and start getting people to do some cutbacks into the box. That was kind of our problem.
Yeah, let's focus a little bit more on the coach himself. He's been in the news a little bit recently, but let's also switch over to our second half sponsor, Suero X. Definitely go online, Amazon.com, SueroX.us. You can go up to Jungle Gyms and get yourself some of this 8 electrolyte beverage. Good stuff, 0 sugar, 0 calories. Suero X. Go online and buy you some. It's good stuff. Let's continue to talk then. Basically, I want to bring up the whole thing surrounding Berhalter and in general surrounding what you do with a managerial position if you're bounced out in the World Cup. We've looked at some of the teams have already gotten rid of their coach. The big name Tata Martino in Mexico, he's gone. Roberto Martinez in Belgium, the team underperformed, didn't make the knockout round. He's gone. Ado from Ghana, they underperformed as well, didn't make it. Paulo Bento from South Korea, who was expected to step down and really only needed the loss to, I think, make that in stone. But the big news this week was talk about, Berhalter maybe getting another shot at it for 2026. So I want to really give it to you guys. Let's start on one side. If you were the U.S. Soccer Federation, would you bring back in Berhalter for what you need for 2026? Don't all knock down the doors here to answer this question. But
if I'm USSF, if I'm Ernie Stewart, I think the answer is yes, absolutely. I think I'd look at Berhalter and say, okay, we would like you to stay. I think ultimately Berhalter's job, he had basically Berhalter won everything, right? Except for the 2019 Gold Cup, where he finished second, which was expectations. Berhalter won or met the goals that people thought were reasonable for the U.S. He won the Gold Cup. He won Nations League. He made it to the knockout rounds of the World Cup. He qualified for the World Cup to begin with. That we didn't do that the time before. Beyond that, you look at the objectives that you would have been given for a coach going into it. I would say it was restore the program back to where it once was in 2010 and 2014. We made consecutive round of 16 appearances. And then in 2018, we were not even at the World Cup, like I mentioned. So getting back to that level was important. And then on top of that, you have this generation coming in. You've got the U.S. hosting in 2026. You have a generation that's phased out after 2018 with Dempsey and Tim Ream and Bedoya, so many players, Jones. Moving on from that was a big deal. And quite frankly, Berhalter's done both of those things. I would look at it and say, well, it's not even that he's meeting expectations. It's now he's going and looking and saying, oh yeah, let's play pretty soccer. Let's play a very proactive kind of game. Let's play a game that, quite frankly, you can actually implement and do at such a high level that like other teams struggle to keep up just because of the game plan, because you can execute that. That's really impressive stuff. If I'm USSF, regardless of the talk of what happens with other national teams, I would want Berhalter to stay. I think that's a really easy choice from that direction.
Okay. Justin, DJ, any opinions if you're looking at it from that side?
I mean, it's a Berhalter coming or going is a major tournament move. I mean, do you believe in him to prepare us for, I think, what is a Copa America run in 2024? Or do you think that he's the man for the 2026 tournament? I think you're going to have your answer in the Copa America. He doesn't make it past that if he isn't the guy. If he performs well in that kind of tournament, then yes. Currently, we're in Nations League right now, CONCACAF Nations League. So if we don't just put away this group, then I think the play resumes in June 2023, I believe. So if we don't put away this group and we don't have a strong performance against Canada and Mexico, then that's the easy answer. He's out. But yeah, it's a big tournament move. I think currently I would slide on the fence of I would like to see Berhalter out, and it's not because of this World Cup performance. It's really about kind of the allegiance to his system and allegiance to players who may or may not should have made this roster.
Yeah, that's a good point that you bring up with the Copa America could be coming to the United States in 2024. It has come to the U.S. twice before. It would be interesting if they use that as a gauge. But I also, personally looking at that, I wonder if the USSF would want to wait that long before they make a change. I would think you'd want to give the coaching staff enough time to prepare for the World Cup, but maybe not having to focus so much on qualification. I don't know if that means that you put more stock into Copa America.
Yeah, we'll tell that to Morocco.
Truth.
That's one of the teams I drafted, so I'm hoping they can go further than they down this.
Real quick, I just want to add the thing that we haven't really touched on is like, okay, if we get rid of Berhalter, where do we go next? And, for me, I look out into the world market, and obviously there will be some coaches who become available. I think this job is more desirable than it used to be, but I don't exactly see people lining up to be the U.S. men's national team job either. So I start looking at options and thinking to myself, okay, well, if we're going to make a change, what direction do we lean? And right now, there aren't any clear options. Obviously, everyone would love to have Jesse Marsch on board, but unless he gets the can, which is, I guess, realistic in the next 6 months, I don't really see him like uprooting himself and changing. He's on this path and he's been chasing it for a while now in Europe. I just don't think that's an option unless he's made available outside of his own choices. I can't see him really jumping at that, because if he doesn't do well, be it the Copa America or at the next tournament, that severely dents his ability to keep chasing that dream in Europe. And I think he's a young enough manager that he's got 10, 15 years ahead of him still that he's staring at a little bit. So right now you then have to look into like, okay, who can we bring in that's going to give us that's going to get us further than what Berhalter currently does. And as things currently stand, I don't know that there's anyone that really jumps out as an obvious choice. And I think the job's Berhalter's as long as he wants it.
Not a believer in Tata Martino.
I mean, look, Tata's great, but like Tata's old book now, man. He's old hat. And this isn't the last job that he's not met expectations with. Like Tata has hit a couple home runs, but he's also had a bunch of strikeouts too. And frankly, I think that's unignorable. Like Mexico are in a downswing, but they weren't that bad. Like they really cratered over the last 2 years, almost entirely under his watch. And that's not entirely due to the talent gap that they're kind of dealing with at the moment.
Yeah,
I mean, go ahead, Jeff.
I would not trust my team with Tata Martino. I think you can say he's a luxurious name to consider, but considering that he brought Mexico down from the level that they were already subpar at, I don't know if he would do much to really motivate this team to perform ahead of where Mexico's never been.
You want a proven winner candidate?
Hit me with it, sure.
How about let's go back to 2020, Caleb Porter. Let's bring him in on this.
Too soon?
He's looking for a job.
Justin's definitely aiming for some negative tweets out there.
No way, man.
Here's a name that's popped up. Jim Curtin.
We'd love to have him. Will he be in that place?
Considering that FC Cincinnati tried to pry him away from Philadelphia, he's got some good experience bringing up youngsters, fitting them into a system. But I also think it's the system in Philadelphia that's worked for them, that their academy's been really good and Curtin's been able to plug in players for their talent. But at the same time, he's had to depend on big names being signed to the team. And so I don't know if he's the name that you seek out for this. It would, I think, require him to have a lot of control of this U.S. team.
I would also like to mention that the way Curtin plays his Philadelphia side, it's a really weird team in terms of tactics. Like, they're definitely very effective, but like you go and you look at the USA, we're ostensibly strongest in our midfield with MMA. And Philadelphia very much like to play just bypassing the midfield. And I don't know what Curtin would do with the national team. He's only been at Philadelphia. It's kind of like bringing Berhalter in that way, where you're jumping into an unknown. I don't know. Like, I think I mentioned, like, that's what I think USSF, it's a no-brainer move for Berhalter. Just as a fan, I'm a little more nervy about it. But I think at least whoever you want to bring in, you want to have a level of continuity. Someone who can at least see, okay, this is what the US is going for. Let's go a little bit in that direction, but a little bit of a different, little nuance, different nuance would be what I'd go for. And I don't know that Curtin brings that.
Okay, so I guess we could basically say right now it's a toss-up. The way that I see the MLS right now is that there are a lot of veterans that are still, that have coached this team before that probably shouldn't be called back in just to be a stopgap. Bruce Arena. But we also have a lot of coaches, I think, that still need a lot of experience. Like I said, maybe with more than one team. They need to have some seasoning. And I think that's why a lot of people are saying Jesse Marsch. But at the same time, I don't want to take him away from his situation.
Yeah, if I can toss out one other name, and this is a name that I keep hearing pop up in some of the rumor circles out there, is Peter Vermes. Someone who's been around for a long. I'm not saying I like the idea, but he's been around for a long time. He's definitely someone that has the trust of a lot of the guys who have been through MLS, rightly or wrongly. And the kind of tie-in that U.S. Soccer has with the National Training Center that's out in Kansas City, there's a lot of tight integration between those two organizations. And ultimately, we keep talking about decisions USSF might make. They are a historically really predictably safe operating organization. Like, they don't take chances very often. And ultimately, I'd be blown away if they went for someone that was either outside of MLS ranks or someone who doesn't have a boatload of international experience already on their resume.
I think I think this also depends quite a bit on whether or not Berhalter wants to go. Do you see Berhalter wanting to expand his sphere of influence by trying club coaching again?
I think there's a good chance of that. You have to look the way that other coaches were talking about Berhalter. Van Gaal said nice things. Gareth Southgate said nice things. You have to look and say, well, okay, maybe somebody in Holland or in Germany is listening. I would believe it, given just what we saw from the U.S. I would believe that there's an opportunity there for Berhalter, and I also have to wonder, after 3 years, after 3 COVID years, after 3 very critical years from fans, after for a coach who's so much of a systems guy, for a coach who's so much of like who likes to groom, and maybe groom's not the right word, but likes to see his players grow. The international game might not be quite what he's looking for, and people are whispering about that. And you see the MLS soccer guys talking about that on the website, and I buy it a little bit. We'll see, but I'd believe it if it were true.
Before we moved on, I'll put a small twist here, and I actually think I discussed this at the live after the live show on Saturday. I would keep Berhalter, but here's a small twist. I would bring Tim Ream in as one of my coaches. I think his performance as the veteran back there, I think stabilized the defense as far as it could go. And I think he's just got this. He looks like he wants to be a coach in the future. Maybe I'm using just my sense of intuition, but I think bringing Tim Ream in to help Berhalter out, I think that at least creates some sort of bridge.
I'll say what I said to you after the live show too. I 100% believe or can see Tim Ream leading this USA team to a World Cup glory in like 2038 or something. So I'm on board with that. I think Tim Ream's got it.
Oh, he has to be off the pitch by then.
He has to be off the pitch.
I was trying to do some quick math to make sure that was a World Cup year, but it is, yeah, it's that 16 years down the road. So you got that right. We're going to move on a little bit. I think we're going to try to have a final show after the World Cup goes bye-bye for another 4 year. Well, another year. The Women's World Cup comes next year. But we'll talk more about the roster, who really shone, who played very well to consider call-ups for the next cycle. But we're just going to roll into the last portion of our show here. Really quickly, once again, reach out to our not our sponsors, our Patreon sponsors. Read through the names here. I'm getting better at this, Boston. Swear to God. We like to shout out all of the people that help us out in Patreon. Ree Lee, John Davidson, Mike Hudson, Robert Stevens, Laura Failer, Matt Adamczyk, Riley Stephen Burke, James Denbo, Tom Niehaus, Brian Weigel, Brian Giles, Dan Albers, Will Kajcek, Ian Rexroad, Augustus Caceres, Carl Feit, Kyle Pohl, Christine Sharma, Rupesh, Tom Beversdorf, Jason, who is super average, John Haskell, Ryan Ernest, Mary Lou, Wes Anastasi, Clifford Adams, Rob Pierce, Tom Spife, Pierce Johnson, Mike Prentice, Mr. and Mrs. Whiterhold, Rob Graysel, Bradley Weigel, Kevin Day, Jamie Smed, Alex Carnegas, Mike Bowman, Patrick Laney, Dave Tangler, Brett Sova, Chris Hubbard, Kevin Cooney, Joe Max, Jack Emery, Sarah Gorman, David Moore, Bob Ryan, Ryan Durkin, Bart Lebeda, Robert Triple, Joe Laura, Bill Leopold, and everybody else that helps us out. Thank you very much for all your help. Let's go into our last segment here. We didn't have a show on Monday, but good news is that we've actually seen all of the round of 16 now come out to fruition. So we know what the matchups are going to be. Netherlands, Argentina, Croatia, Brazil, all on one side of the bracket. Morocco versus Portugal, and then England versus France on the other side. These are juicy matchups. Interesting enough, going into this last few games, it looked like it was going to be just UEFA, the European federations, and the South American federations. And now Morocco comes in and takes one half of the Iberian Peninsula out. Looking at these matchups, which one is the juiciest for you guys?
England, France.
England, France.
Yep.
Okay, Justin, expand on that. What matchup are you looking at for that?
I'm really interested to see who's going to play defense in this matchup. I think both teams have a super impressive, and really you could call it front five in each team. But defense has been lacking. They've made a lot of careless mistakes in the last game, in particular for both teams. But England, France, you got Mbappe, Giroud, Benzema. I mean, they're playing pretty good right now, France, and in England right now. I think they shook off some of the pre-tournament form, so it is as appetizing as can be. I mean, two high-profile teams: France looking to repeat, England trying to, get there first time since the '60s to the final. This is an amazing matchup.
Yeah, Coach will definitely say it's coming home. He's got England in our draft. Adnan, what do you see as sort of this game? What game is really jumping out to you?
England, France. But to say something different, did you see how Brazil played in that first half versus South Korea? I just want to watch all these Brazil games because these are some of the prettiest goals of this whole tournament. And it's been what? These have been the prettiest Brazil goals for 20 years, I think. Back to the heyday of like Ronaldo and Ronaldinho. Just that we had that glorious scissor kick with Richarlison, and then Richarlison did it again with, I know he's a Tottenham guy, but that was a straight up Arsenal goal with first the dribble and then, or just the juggling, and then the 1-2 passes. Glorious stuff. Then you have I think Vicinius Jr. with just a little chip. That was always my thing, where not the chip specifically, but growing up, I was the creative midfielder. I never scored. I could never score, but I got the assists, and this Brazil team is playing with so much joy. It's really hard to think that Croatia is going to be able to hold up onto that, but I think every game that Brazil is going to be in is going to be fun.
It's going to be an interesting matchup between Croatia and Brazil. They have played each other in the World Cup, but that's always been group stage considerations. I think it was 2006 and then 2014. In fact, in that 2014 game, Neymar scored twice. So a little bit of a hey, how do you do for this game? Croatia, yeah, they're one of those teams where like I expected them to be this far, but I haven't yet seen, I think, the glimpses of what they provided at the last cycle.
Yeah, with Croatia, they've been putting it together, but you kind of still have to wonder when does Father Time catch up to Luka Modric and some of the other guys there. But they've been very good in when they've been moving the ball around. They just haven't been scoring very much. That's something that this Brazil team, though.
Okay, DJ, what game are you looking forward to if it hasn't been mentioned already?
I have to quickly point out two things. One, it was definitely a Tottenham goal from Richarlison. It's just what it is these days. Secondly, all hail Luka Modric. But the match I'm actually looking at, the other two ones that everyone's mentioned so far have been really good. Morocco, Portugal actually just really fascinates me. Morocco, no one picked to be here. So this is always like an X factor match where you're like, nobody prepared for this. No one really got themselves up for it. So you kind of are rooting for the underdog, the Cinderella here. Also, this Portugal team, I don't know if anyone had a really chance to watch that match. As most teams do when they decide to bench Ronaldo these days, they were just a different side. And really, I think the most formidable we've seen them since they won the Euros. And I frankly think like that might be the catalyst to kind of get them over the edge. And I think everyone in that team is insulated and used to ignoring Ronaldo and his tantrums. And I think at this point that they are looking threatening. So I'm intrigued. This game has a lot of X factor in it because I'm not really sure what's going to go down.
Okay, I think that Portugal team looked. Oh wait, I was thinking when they won the Euros. They looked garbage when they won the Euros. So I think they looked a lot better than that.
That's a fair point.
So I'm going to circle Netherlands and Argentina just because I have this feeling that Netherlands can pull off a pretty big upset. This might be the last time you see Messi play. There was something about Netherlands that I haven't seen them trip badly. I was mentioning how they had cold players where Memphis Depay, Steve Bergwijn haven't been stepping up as the striker, as the forward position. And then Memphis Depay scores within the first 15 minutes against the US. So it's one of those teams that I feel has dormant offensive power. And I want to see if that challenges Messi. If Messi gets knocked out at this point, I think it will be, I think, a shock to the system. But I also think that Netherlands can pull it off. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our hour here, but because we're not going to be really on until this entire thing happens. Give me your finalists and who wins. Let's start with you, Justin, in the corner.
I'm going France, Brazil, and I'm going France takes it home. I think France is the first repeat. Said it in my pre-tournament prediction. I'm sticking with it. I think France has enough quality. They have the experience. No moment's too big. No pressures on them. This is a perfect team for them, and Mbappe is going to get it done.
All right. Thanks for joining us, by the way. Good to see you at Grainworks, of course. Over to Adnan. What do you expect the final to look like?
I have not thought that far ahead. I think Brazil will win the whole thing. I don't know who they're going to play against. Let me go with, I want to say Morocco, just because it's the most fun option. But I don't actually believe that. I feel like maybe I'm wishing that in like I did with Australia. Let's go with England, Brazil, with Brazil winning like 2-0.
Okay, sounds pretty conceivable. They have to go through Argentina, perhaps to do that, but we'll see. Thank you as well for joining us tonight. And DJ, why don't you wrap things up with what your prediction might be?
I don't even know if this is possible, but I'm going to root for chaos and ask for an Argentina-Portugal final and Ronaldo start on the bench and just be awful the whole game. Like every camera shot of him, just losing his mind. They ask him to get up and sub in. He won't. And then like they finally need him to come in and he does. And then he like whiffs on a goal line opportunity. I want as much chaos as possible here. So let's go for Argentina, Portugal.
Thank you, DJ. Unfortunately, my prediction before all of this was Belgium and Brazil, with Brazil pulling off all the stops to win it. And of course, my Belgium was also one of my draft picks, and they underperformed brilliantly, spectacularly, flaming out like a phoenix. So I guess I just have to bring in the other team I think would create the most chaos. And as much as Portugal is there for me, I want to say it's Brazil, England. I think England has one of those deceptively deep teams and passionate fan bases that's going to fuel them to get by teams like France, teams like Portugal. But I also think that Brazil just has too much star talent on them. So I'll say Brazil 2-1. We'll keep it small. But that closes another fantastic episode of the World Cup edition. We'll have one more. We'll cover everything about the World Cup that's happened. We'll preview the upcoming World Cup and maybe Copa America if this 2024 tournament does get established in the United States. But on behalf of Adnan, on behalf of Justin, on behalf of DJ, once again, this is Jeff Tebbets. Thank you very much. And I'll say it again for you, Nick. Maybe I won't. Have a good evening, everybody.